everybody. Welcome to Autism in Action. I'm your host, Laura Kirby McIntosh. And with me today, this is my dream interview, we have the one, the only David Lepofsky. Now, I was going to start with a really fulsome introduction of this great man and his many accomplishments on behalf of people with disabilities, but it's about 45 degrees in this room, so I'm just going to say Google him and be impressed, and I just want to get straight to the interview. So, David, tell us a little bit about your experience personally of disability. How do you come to this community?
When I was a kid, I was born with partial vision in one eye. I was very nearsighted and totally blind in the other eye. As I reached my teens, the vision of my good eye started dropping. By the time I was 20, it was completely gone. I've been totally blind for some 40 years or so. Right. And I've had a successful time in school and then college, university and law school, and I had a career with the Ontario government as a government lawyer for 33 years, and I'm now retired from that position, but I'm a visiting professor at the Osgoode Hall Law School.
Great. I'm going to ask you a question I ask every single one of my guests, and it's simply this. What does the word advocacy mean to you? What does it mean to be an advocate?
Well, it means trying to take the world and make it a better place to meet our needs. So some people just take the world as they find it and figure I'm just going to suffer my way through, and other people look at the world and say, we got to make this better, and that's what advocacy is about.
All right, give me your elevator pitch for the AODA Alliance. What is your organization and what have you done?
So outside of my paid employment, I've been involved for several decades advocating for laws to protect the rights of people with disabilities. I don't do individual cases for clients. I'm not in private practice, so people can't email me and get legal advice because I'm not in practice.
That's important.
But I'm involved in working on community organizing, community leadership, and advocacy to get laws passed and effectively implemented and enforced in this area. An individual case can be one barrier to help one person. New legislation or getting laws effectively implemented could change things for everybody. And so from 1994 to 2005, I had the privilege of, in a volunteer capacity, of leading the community coalition that fought for and won the enactment of Ontario's accessibility law, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA.
Right.
Since then, that coalition was replaced with a successor, which aims at getting that law effectively implemented and enforced. It's called the AODA, so we're the AODA Alliance, and since 2009, I've been the chair.
All right. Well, as you know, I work in a similar organization, the Ontario Autism Coalition. So I'm curious, we've done our kinds of actions over the years, but what do you think were some of your most successful tactics campaigning for the ODA?
Well, both fighting to get the law passed, voting and trying to get it effectively implemented, I find there's several strategies that work. First, you need to come up with a message that unites people. So we find that advocating to tear down barriers against people with disabilities unites everybody. If I'm blind, the lack of braille on elevator buttons is a barrier. If I'm deaf, the lack of sign language in a doctor's office is a barrier. If I'm in a wheelchair, the lack of an elevator to get down to a subway station is a barrier. If I have autism, blaring music at a restaurant is a barrier. It's also a barrier, by the way, for everybody else who hates blaring music, which is pretty much everybody.
Pretty much everybody. But we just turn it off.
The beauty of the term barrier is it becomes the mirror in which all people with all kinds of disabilities see their own experience reflected. It unites us. So it's not a matter of the government being able to play us off against each other.
Right.
Because we're all fighting to tear down barriers. The other thing about the term barrier is that it unites us and people of all political stripes. No business wants barriers. If you say, hey, do you think it's good to have barriers that impede us from spending our money in your store? No, I don't want those barriers. People on the left may argue that barriers are unjust. People on the right may argue that barriers are economically inefficient. I don't care why people are against barriers. I just care that they are against barriers. So that's tactic number one. Tactic number two that really matters is giving people a way to get active individually.
Right.
The old style way of political organizing is, get a bunch of people to go out and do a demonstration. And sometimes that can be very effective. And I know the Ontario Action Coalition has done Autism Coalition has done fantastic work in that regard. But there are lots of people who can't get to a demonstration, or there are, and it's Canada, doing it in February kind of is not practical.
Yeah.
And also, if you organize a demonstration on the day that somebody else, I don't know, President Trump comes up with another bizarre tweet, your efforts are lost. Exactly. So we like coming up with ways to make get people active. So I'll give you an example. We've come up with, and over a year, I've been running a strategy of getting people to go out and take pictures of barriers and then tweet them.
Thank you. I wanted you to talk about this. So tell
and the idea is, even if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. Go to twitter.com, and I don't care whether your Twitter handle is your own name or is a pseudonym like Access Buff or whatever. Just go create a Twitter handle and then do a search on the search term we use, which the law is the AODA, so our search term is the $ or hashtag, and then AODA fail.
Yes.
And you search there, and you're going to see people with disabilities and others around Ontario who've taken pictures of bears and tweeted them. And they use that search term in it. You just include words to describe the barrier. So we blind people, I'm totally blind, so we can know what's in the picture.
Right.
But also use that search term, that hashtag, so that anybody who searches on it turns up your tweet. And there you'll see, I've shown politicians, I have shown university professors, I've shown journalists these tweets, and they go, oh my God, look at all these barriers. But the other thing that we do is we then retweet them to every member of the legislature that's on Twitter. And it's like a petition.
Yes.
But every time if you go and search on hashtag AODA fail and you see that I've tweeted Premier Wynne or Patrick Brown or Andrea Horwath or one of their members of the legislature, and you retweet, it's like you're saying, me too, I agree with this.
Exactly.
And we know that they follow these, so it really helps add pressure. And this is a way, the weapon in our battle is the smartphone.
Yep.
And the experience of individuals. They don't have to all go to a demonstration. They could just be doing what they do daily, and they encounter a barrier, they could tweet it. And it doesn't have to be a physical barrier like steps instead of a ramp. It could be a description of here's a school where they don't provide these services to kids with autism. Hashtag AODA fail, or this school will not admit a child with autism with a service animal. Hashtag AODA fail.
Right.
The words and the picture, and even if you don't have a picture, it works.
Yeah.
But you and I did one a couple of weeks ago that's gone all over the internet, where you got me to stand with my arm around two
beautiful boys.
Beautiful boys. One each with their service animal. Both boys have autism. One who can take his dog to school because he goes to a school board where they're enlightened, and one who's at the Waterloo Catholic Board where they're refusing to let him in and he has to go to the Human Rights Tribunal. Right. And that's a picture of me as a disability advocate with these two boys on either side, one who's allowed to, one who's not. They both have autism, they both have a service animal.
Yeah.
The picture says it's not 1,000 words, it's 1,000 arguments.
Yes.
Okay, there's only one side to that debate. Yeah. So the final strategy, so we believe in coming up with solutions. So actually there's two other strategies. Okay. The third strategy is we need to not only unite all people with disabilities, but we need to unite all people behind our message.
Right.
So our message, the old way of thinking was, well, there are people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and we've got to convince people without disabilities.
Tell our viewers and listeners what you always say at the beginning of your speeches.
When I'm giving a lecture, and you got to understand, I'm totally blind, I stand up and I say to people, I want to know if this subject affects you. I want to see if this is part of your life. So I say to people, I want you to raise your hands if you have no disability now and are certain you'll never get one. And then I turn my head like I'm looking around, and I go, I don't see any hands. And of course everybody laughs because it's a blind joke and everything, and that's fine. But I then explain to everybody that we are the minority of everyone, because everyone either has a disability now or is going to get one later.
Yeah.
So, and I turn the tables around. I say, we're not talking about what can people without disabilities do for us, poor people with disabilities. We talk about what we people with disabilities can do for those who haven't gotten theirs yet. So when they get theirs, they don't face the barriers. We have to.
That's a transformational way of thinking.
Well, and that's advocacy, is trying to change the way people think about it. When we talk about voters with disabilities, you should see how politicians lean forward. So instead of thinking of us as some small minority, we are the minority of everyone.
Yeah.
The final strategy is ask for things where no one has a good argument for saying no. So for example, we are now urging the province of Ontario to develop and enact a regulation to be called an education accessibility standard. What's that? It would be a regulation that tells school boards, colleges, universities, daycares, job training programs, what barriers facing students with disabilities they got to remove, how and when. So what's the argument in favor? Well, we have more than a third of a million students with disabilities in Ontario.
Right.
They face barriers every day when they go to school or college or university or try to, or to other educational organizations. This hurts everybody. It hurts the students, it hurts our economy, because if you can't get a good education, you can't get a good job.
That's right.
So if I'm looking at a politician trying to make the case, well, do you think we don't have a third of a million students with disabilities? Do you think they don't face barriers when they go to school?
No.
Like, there's no argument on that one.
Right.
Do you think that's fair? Do you think it's better to leave it to 71 school boards, hundreds and hundreds of schools, universities, colleges, each teacher, each professor to have to reinvent the wheel to get rid of those barriers? It makes no sense.
No.
So it's an argument with only one side.
Right.
So if you take these strategies together, come up with terminology that unites us, barrier, come up with tactics that we can use in our daily lives where we don't have to go take a whole lot of time out of our way. That's the AODA fail strategy.
Right.
Come up with a message that shows that we're the minority of everyone so that no politician can ignore us.
Yeah.
And then ask for things that no one can refuse.
Perfect.
And that, in a nutshell, is what I do.
Okay. I want to come back to the issue of the education accessibility standard in a second, but first there's a question I've been really wanting to ask you for several months now, because you've done a lot of systemic level advocacy and a lot of legal advocacy, which is really important, but I've never really had the chance to talk to you about individual advocacy, say for parents that are watching that, you know, have come to the end of what was a very difficult school year for them and their child. What tactics do you recommend to people that are advocating just at the school level when they're dealing with
the exact same things I just said. So,
but how do you translate that?
Okay, how do you translate? Okay, as a parent, the first thing you got to do, if you're trying to arrange supports or accommodations for your child in a school, the first thing you got to do is before you get to the school, you got to figure out what is my goal? What am I trying to achieve?
Right.
And I don't mean what particular program or what particular technology. I mean, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Come up with a goal that no one can disagree with. I want to make sure my child can learn the same curriculum the other kids can.
That would be a good place to start.
So, like, and what principal or teacher or school board can say, oh, no, you're not going to do that. We don't even want to try.
Right.
So then you got to look at the options you got to research and work with the school board or whatever to find out what options there are. Next, you got to find examples where they've worked. Like the beauty of your service animal in the school thing is, for the school boards are going, oh no, we can't allow it. The answer is these other school boards are allowed it.
Exactly.
And they haven't had a crisis. It hasn't, destroyed the education as we know it. If somebody who's blind and wants to apply for a job as a lawyer, one of the best supports they get is by contacting those of us who've already worked as a blind person who's a lawyer.
Right.
Because they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Right? And then you got to figure out who at the school board is the real decision maker. And this is hard because it isn't necessarily the person they tell you to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to, through a bunch of questions, some very friendly questions, you can ask, who makes the decision and who do they consult and who's got the final say and when you and the next thing is do their work for them. Okay, and this is frustrating for some people, but you got to do it.
It's the reality.
It could even mean setting out, do the research. Here are the examples where it's been done. Here's links to websites. Here's a video where we have an interview with a teacher who's done that and it works really well.
Right.
Here's a book, how to do it, whatever it may be. Here's a list of 10 tips. That are approved by the whatever association.
Right.
Give it to them on a silver platter. And I'm not saying that in some condescending way. The fact is, if you make it easier for them to do it for you, they're more likely to do it for you.
And speaking as a teacher, I can tell you, obviously that makes a heck of a lot of sense to me. Like my time is precious to have 5 minutes available to sit down for a meeting and then have a parent say, actually, I've brought you all of this stuff already.
Here it is on a silver platter.
It's a beautiful thing.
Well, think of it this way. If you got the choice for fast food, going in, grab some food, it's all ready, or having to go,
Grocery
farm. No, forget grocery. Farming.
Go to the farm.
Right?
Yeah.
Raise the vegetables
Yeah.
and raise the animals, harvest,
Yeah.
bring it all in, and then cook. Like, no, I'll go for fast food.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you said about finding the person that's in a position to make the decisions.
Right.
For me, I've often used the line when I'm in a meeting, okay, I get it that you have the power to say no to me right now. Who has the power to say yes?
Now, there's a couple of other strategy things.
Yeah, tell me.
No matter how hard it is, always stay nice.
Yes.
You may want
hard.
to, if you want to blow your stack, go home and blow your stack.
Right.
Okay, go home to your family, your loved ones, your best friend, whatever. But don't blow your stack in front of the teacher or the principal, because the odds are it is not going to help you, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Moreover, you only do good advocacy if you're in control of your emotions. So it may be hard to choke it back, and you may have to stay very calm, and it may not be easy, but you got to do it.
Yep.
Okay, and the only other tip is look for natural allies. In any organization, there are people who are going to be likely to help you. It may be the teacher may be on your side.
Yes.
But the bureaucracy doesn't allow it, or there's policies or whatever. So it's a matter of work with them and see what can be done.
Yeah.
And thank you gets you a long way to be able
really
to.
Does.
If you walk into a meeting and begin by talking about how everybody is screwed up and nobody cares and whatever, you're going to get everybody's back up. But if you say, look, everybody here is here not because the pay is fantastic, but because you want to teach kids.
Right.
And you want kids to succeed. And I got a kid who wants to succeed. So we are all on the same trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the frustration is that my child needs X and you guys need something to accommodate X, and the province hasn't given it to you, or the school board hasn't. So let's see if we can find a way. And there is one other strategy. I always say it's the final one and I come up with another. The easiest way to get progress is not to ask for the whole enchilada first. So if you want to try something, say, can we try it for a day?
Nice.
Because it's easier for them to say yes for a day than to say yes forever. And it's much harder for them to say no for a day.
Right.
If we're going to try the service animal, can we just try it for a morning? If you got a problem, you phone me. We'll have the animal out of there by noon.
Right.
And then we'll sit down to have another conversation.
That's a great tactic.
But let's get her, because
you can do anything for a day.
They've got to be able to say, no, we can't even try it for not even a minute, right? Other than playing toss, catch with an unpegged hand grenade, there's few things you gotta say, no, we're not even trying.
Right.
Okay, so that some of those strategies, and by the way, not only is it important to say thank you, but celebrating success.
Yes.
At the end of the day, say, you know what, we tried it, this is great, thank you.
Yes. The power of thank you is priceless.
And I'm not
And
beyond,
also Timbits. Timbits at meetings.
Health food, yeah.
Yes, celery sticks. Sorry.
But no, those strategies help. But it's important to understand. Let me just draw on the experience that I have as a lawyer in a courtroom.
Okay.
Now, parents going to school are not trained as lawyers, and they're not in a courtroom. But there is something that's very similar. When I'm in a courtroom, I may be upset or angry or annoyed or frustrated at what the judge or the other lawyer may say, but I never show it.
Right.
I have to keep my poker face. And I never act out of anger. I cannot act in a courtroom out of anger. Even if I'm angry, I've got to bottle it, and I got to be professional. I got to get up and there's 3 reasons, Your Honor, why this person's position is wrong. Let me explain them to you. I can be firm, I can be persuasive, but I can't be driven by anger, because anger loses my control over my ability to make my point.
I think that's really important for parents to hear, especially in our community. I mean, we have a place to vent our anger. It's our Facebook group. That's where we go and we vent. Yeah. But keeping your cool in a meeting, especially when it's your kid, is so hard.
It is. But
I think the
hard.
other tactic is bring somebody with you that can calm you down if you're starting to get agitated, and they could be the.
And if I'm getting angry, there's I'll pause for a minute. I'll look down and by the way, here's the thing this is one of my last points.
Okay.
Of which there'll be many more. But these kind of meetings can be very tense and trying for a parent.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're on the spot and you're worried about, I've got to say the right thing. And some parents, have my professional training, and a lot of parents don't have the training of somebody who gets up in a courtroom and makes arguments and cross-examines and all that stuff.
Right.
What's the formula for success? One word: pause. If somebody says something or asks you something and you're not certain the answer, or you're frustrated and you don't always have to answer right away. You can always pause and take a couple of seconds to think about it, or even a minute. You could say, can I think about that for a minute? And I'm going to, as a blind guy, I'm going to teach you some body language. One way that you can always get a pause is by looking down for a minute, because it means you're thinking. And if you have a notepad, scribble a couple of notes to yourself.
Right.
But the risk is if you start talking before you thought through what you want to say.
Yes.
And you may stumble yourself into something you regret. So it's always better during one of these meetings, if you're asked something you're not certain, you can always say, let me think about it, or can I get back to you on that?
Yeah. And that's a really useful tip as well in any kind of public speaking, to just take a pause and add emphasis and all of that. Okay. Yeah. I feel like time is flying here, but I want to ask you one more question.
You ask me one more, and then I want to do a little plug, if I may.
Oh, well, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to lead into the plug.
Go for it.
Okay. So the Premier finally said earlier this year that she was going to agree to start the process to bring in an education accessibility standard, which you talked about earlier. Can you talk to our viewers about the survey? And can you talk to our viewers about some of the concerns that you have right now at this very, very beginning stage of the process?
Okay, let me begin by explaining what this is. As I said earlier, an education accessibility standard, which is something we've never had, would be a regulation that would tell school boards or colleges or universities or other education organizations, here are specific barriers you got to fix, and here's when you got to fix them by. See, right now, those barriers are all illegal under the Human Rights Code, but the only way you can get those rights enforced is by individually filing human rights complaints. So,
like the Kenner and Ivy case for the service dog.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So rather than have to fight every single school board that won't allow in the service animals, let's have a rule for service animals for all the school boards.
What a crazy idea.
And similarly, like when I had to fight a human rights case, in fact, two, over a decade ago, to force the Toronto Transit Commission to announce all subway and bus stops.
Yes.
So we blind people and you sighted people can know where the heck we are.
Right. Can I interrupt for a second? Henceforth, when you are on public transit and you hear the announcement go off, whatever the machine is that makes the announcement go off, it's called a Lepofsky. That's what I've trained my kids.
That's very funny.
It's a Lepofsky. Carry on.
You mean loud and annoying? Is that what you mean?
No, powerful and informative.
That's very sweet. But in any event, I had to fight that individually. There's a transportation accessibility standard that now says that they all have to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so an education standard, if it's done right, will identify the full range of barriers that face students with all kinds of disabilities, whether it's blindness or deafness or autism or intellectual disability or mental health issues or whatever, whatever it may be.
Right.
How do they develop this standard? Well, under the Disabilities Act, what the government's supposed to do is to appoint an independent committee. It's called the Standards Development Committee. And that committee has to be 50% people with disabilities and also representatives from the education sector. And they sit down and they come up with recommendations for the government on what should be in the standard, which barriers, which fixes.
Right.
Now, the government isn't bound by what they recommend, but they develop recommendations, they consult the community, and then they issue recommendations. When they're done, the government takes those recommendations, studies them, and decides how much or how little they're going to enact. So that's the way it works. So the first step in doing this would be to appoint a standards development committee.
Right.
And by the way, I've applied to be on it. We'll see if they think I should, but I've applied.
I'm going to apply
Okay.
too.
Well, we need as many people to apply as possible.
Yes.
Who will be good and talented and able to lend their
Message me if you're
expertise.
interested about that.
So the Premier, to her credit, last December 5th, 2016, agreed to create an education accessibility standard, but it took the government another 6 full months just to launch the process of starting to invite applications, which is a ridiculous delay,
Yeah.
an inexcusable delay. Now that they're doing that, they've also, to their credit, said that they're running an online survey, which is currently only open till the 14th of July. If you go to, I'll give you the website to go to find everything you want to know about this. You go to my coalition's website, www.aodaalliance.org/education. Everything you need to know on this topic is there, including about the survey.
You're talking super fast, but I'm getting the signal here that we have to end quickly.
Okay,
So let's talk.
So let me be fast.
Okay,
So the
go.
problem is, the government, there are two problems. First, the survey does not include the full range of barriers we need to face. In fact, it's very limited,
Right.
leaves out most barriers. They do include an option for any other barriers. We encourage people to go to our website. You'll see we've given a list of different barriers that we need you to tell them about.
Right.
Go online, answer their questions, but add the barriers that our action tips propose. The second concern is that we want the Standards Development Committee free to consider any barriers that students with disabilities face.
Right.
But the government's thinking of hog-tying the committee. They're thinking of directing them that, oh, you can't consider all accessibility barriers, but only some. Well, what are they going to leave out? Whatever they leave out is telling some kids with disabilities,
Yeah.
you don't count. So we need people to write the Premier now or email her and say that the Education Standards Committee must not be hogtied. It must be free to give advice on any kind of access barriers in our education system. If you want to learn more, here are your tips. Go to aodaalliance.org/education.
Right.
You can follow us on Twitter. We're really active on Twitter at AODA Alliance. If you want to get our email updates, just send an email to the following address: aodafeedback@gmail.com. That's aodafeedback@gmail.com. And all you got to say is sign me up.
Perfect. I can't thank you enough for sharing all of the information that you have. I know we could easily fill 2 more shows, 3 more shows. I'm going to have you back. That's all there is
But
to
let's
it.
do it in February where it's a little cooler in here.
Yeah, amen. All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much for including me.
Oh, it's been wonderful having you. Dream interview for sure. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that, found it helpful. Share this video with your friends and follow his advice. Visit the AODA website and let's stay active promoting the rights of people with disabilities, the rights of kids with autism. All of us or none of us, guys. We gotta unite and we gotta get together on this. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for putting up with us sweating here in front of you. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.